You're muted.
Today, we explore the future of truth.
The Russians, the Republicans, even the Democrats have all in their own way declared war on truth.
From weaponized social media, the fast-growing field of deep fakes, has tech made truth harder to find?
And then, what about objective truth? Has there ever been such a thing?
I'm Alexis Cordato, and this is Future Forward.
I am Stephen Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey, everybody. Light topic. We just thought we'd go back to Plato and see if we could finally figure this darn truth thing out.
From pregnancy to Plato. We cover it all.
See,
on Future
alliteration
Forward.
always works in podcasts. Glad you're all here. Some of you have probably found us through Instagram, where we are now increasingly appearing, which is great. And we always are looking for feedback. So feel free to jump in the comments or send us a note or tweet us or whatever you'd like to do. I want to start way in a kind of an unusual place, but I think it will be relevant for our truth journey today. I want to start in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So, you know, there's this big trial going on. It's the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. And we're not going to get into the trial itself or the evidence in the trial, except to say there was this fascinating moment last week when one of the prosecutors wanted to show a piece of video. And he took out his iPad and he was going to show this piece of video to the jury. And he used the pinch and zoom function on the iPad to zoom in on the video to show a particular portion of the video larger on his iPad. And the defense objected and said, you know, the iPad, when it zooms in, the AI goes and fills in some things and makes up some visual imagery that isn't necessarily real. And the judge agreed and allowed the objection and did not let the prosecutors zoom in on their iPad. Alexa, what do you make of that piece of technology?
I mean, actually, I was not familiar with this story, and I'm just chuckling to myself because I can see why a judge would let it proceed. Not everyone is the most tech fluent. But really, when you zoom in on an Apple, it's going to distort the footage.
Well, I mean, distort, yes, it'll make it blurrier. But I mean, a couple of things there. And again, Apple hasn't responded. A bunch of reporters have reached out to Apple to ask if that's true. But I think I can say with absolute confidence, at least at the moment, AI has nothing to do with the pinch zoom function.
Right.
On an Apple device.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I was like, oh, is it like a bokeh effect? And that's like that's where they're saying it's manipulating the image. But even then, the content of it, like the frame, it should still be the same, right?
Yeah. But I think the point here in terms of our journey into truth for this morning's podcast is that people, you know, first of all, people know different things about tech. The judge knows, you know, perhaps less than you or I, and he actually mispronounced algorithm and called it something funny, and you know, but there is also this sense of unease that what we see may not necessarily be accurate, and you know, this has been true for a long time. I mean, if you go back to all of the controversies about models in fashion magazines that they put in Photoshop and then proceed to make them, inhumanly thin and shaped weirdly, and the issues with OJ Simpson's skin color on the cover of Time magazine. Certainly images have been manipulated, right?
Right. Hmm.
So,
and in a courtroom, eyewitness testimonies are often inaccurate.
yes. So you saying I was there and I saw him do that thing, while it seems quite like an absolute truth, turns out to be often dramatically inaccurate. But the reason why I think the Rittenhouse moment, as I think it's going to become known, is critical, is when you think about all the things that have been going on in the last 2 years, particularly with Black Lives Matter. All of the trials have had kind of at their heart some horrific piece of video.
Right.
Either the police dragging somebody out of a car and shooting them, or the police, and all of these body cams that police are now increasingly wearing and recording their every move, theoretically would make the world more just, more factual. I saw it. It was recorded. We have evidence. But
you think it's having the opposite?
I don't think it's. I don't think it's the opposite. I think it's video becomes prevalent, and then video becomes manipulated. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of where that takes us in the next half hour or so. But I think people's lack of confidence that technology is an honest broker in any way, shape, or form potentially takes us to a really new and scary place.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, before we get into Democrats and Republicans and Russians and all this stuff, let us go in a magical time machine, because I think it's worth saying out loud that this debate over truth and what is true and what is not true and what is objective truth it has been around a long time, and goes back without much effort to Plato. And I liked this particular piece of philosophy because, well, I liked a couple of things as I was poking around, because distinguishing between lies and truth and as this teacher says, and bullshit, I think is relevant. And maybe just by way of example, and Alexa, maybe, so Pam and I often will look at, we agree on many things, and we'll be in a store and we'll look at a pair of pants or a shirt, and she'll say, I really like this, this gray shirt. And I'll say, it's not gray, it's blue. And it is one of those places that we just do not agree on. There's a certain kind of gray blue hue that she sees as gray and I see as blue.
Matt and I are the same way. I mean, he's like partially colorblind, so he recognizes that something that is red to me maybe looks more brown to him. So
if people, routines, they're, there's certain things that are objective truths, like the sky is blue, unless you're colorblind, in which case the sky is green, and I think there are things that we can agree are true, right? I mean, gravity.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a funny line in a book that I've been reading about the debate over AI, and one of the thinkers says to another, if you don't believe in gravity, go to your 11th story balcony and jump off and see how you feel about it. But when you get much past gravity, what are the things we believe in? And I guess the question that I'm struggling with is, what has technology done to kind of broaden the gap and make things less obviously truthful? And is it as simple as just the volume of information that's coming at us? And I think the answer is no, it's more than that.
Yeah. I mean, and speaking broadly, I mean, I feel like because it's easier to connect with people who think like you confirm your perception or beliefs through other people. Like, I'm thinking about like flat earthers. There are textbooks and science and images that show that the earth is spherical, but there are plenty of people who say the earth is flat.
So here's the thing I wonder about flat earthers. I always wonder whether or not, like, secretly they're enjoying the
Like they're trolling us.
Yeah.
I think about that too.
I mean, do they actually really know that, haha, of course the earth is round? But if you say it among your liberal science-based friends, it will make them crazy. And so let's play that game.
I have no idea. But it's an example of, you might be a person, it's like, I don't know how the earth could be round when I'm walking and the ground is flat. And then technology makes it easier for you to find people who confirm or share those same sentiments.
And by the way, here's the problem with trying to make an argument for objective truth. You know, let's take COVID, for example. Masks are good. Masks are bad. Masks are unnecessary. Masks make, you know, like part of what I think no one wants to say out loud is COVID happened. We knew nothing about it. Then we knew a little bit. People turn to, you know, medical experts and the government and say, tell us what to do. You know, at that moment in time, the government says, don't wear 95 masks in the early days of the pandemic, because frankly, we need them for doctors and nurses. You know, then they gear up the manufacturing. There's more masks. They say, now wear masks. But if you're dipping in and out of this debate, there is never a moment where people say, we know what the disease is. We know how it's transmitted. We know what you need to do. Now there are some agreed upon and measurable and testable solutions that include medications and mask wearing and hand washing and a bunch of other things. But depending on what you read on the internets, you know, because things come up, you know, based on popularity, not necessarily on date, you know, it's easy to find, you know, an individual doctor who feels one way today and felt a different way 3 months ago. And I think that makes the overwhelming avalanche of information pretty hard to decipher.
Yep.
It makes the, quote, do my own research thing, you know, for some people deadly.
Yeah. I mean, I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, because obviously there's like a joke. Who was it? Some celebrity said, I'm doing my own research on vaccines, and reference like their cousin in Trinidad or something. Anyway, it's interesting when people say do their own research, because like Googling or whatever as your research, that's something that would never fly in like a university context, right? Like, I actually wonder what percentage of Americans know what a primary source is.
Yeah. I mean, I think, having now been involved in doing some research, I can tell you it's incredibly demanding and, you know, required. I mean, there's an agreed upon set of steps to do research, which requires, you know, multiple sources and peer review. And in the case of, you know, I mean, all of the things that are coming out of the CDC about how to deal with vaccines have to have data behind them. So do your own research and Google this are certainly not the same thing.
Right.
So we'll talk politics, and then I want to get into deep fakes and make sure we spend some time on deep fakes, because I think that is going to change things in some meaningful ways. One of the things I think that no one saw coming was, you know, that political adversaries certainly the Russians and to some extent the Republicans and probably latecomers to the battle, the Democrats and independents, figured out that they could create these quote communities of, the people of Kenosha who want to defend their city, and they could spin up these things that seemed angry and local, but were in fact often sock puppets, often just not real people, not local people, not people that had any history, not, it makes it, what happens when Alexa finds herself in a room full of people that share her beliefs and opinions, and it turns out that lots of those people are not real. They're created to have a political output.
Mm-hmm. Like plants.
Yeah,
it's kind of like in a comedy cellar, like it's a plant, making a joke more or less funny.
So, I mean, I think, to me, and maybe we're jumping to my hope for some solutions, but one of them is just transparency about who's speaking to you and whether or not those people are robots or humans.
So you're saying first line of defense, identifiable, like your identity is verifiable, like you're a real entity. And then the second is disclosure, like disclosing bias, affiliations, etc.
Yes, but again, the problem there too, and this I think is in many ways the big battle over what's happening in social media, which is, when I was writing for Forbes now a number of years ago, I found out very early on that anytime I wrote about Apple, I got a huge number of clicks. If I wrote something positive about Apple, I got a huge number of reads. If I wrote something negative about Apple, I got a lot of hate mail, a lot of nasty comments, but it hardly mattered. The internet trained me very quickly that writing things that were divisive about Apple did well in terms of a measure that at that point Forbes cared about. I think similarly, if you're sitting at Facebook, it's very hard to dial down controversial kind of adversarial political comments because they do really well. I still think, there's a part of me after 4 years of Trump that is fairly addicted to internet rage. And I'm having to like dial that part of my internet behavior down and find new ways to participate back in the community, because so much of it was rage based for so long, which I'm not proud of, by the way, listeners. Sorry about that, but it is the truth. All right, so let's talk about maybe, Alexa, I'll ask you the question. Can you think of anything in your digital life that you at first thought was true and then turned out to be provably untrue?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if this is like a good example, but I feel like a lot of the posts, like let's say on Instagram, right? They give me a perception that someone's doing really well. They're thriving, they're happy, they're traveling, they're doing all of these things. And then like a few months later or something like that, I'll catch up with them and I'll find out that like they're going through a divorce or like clinically depressed and lost their job and are having a really hard time.
Yeah, no, there's definitely, kind of like the FOMO, like putting your best life or your fictitious best life out there.
And there are people who have also like faked like work experiences, unfortunately, that I know of.
Years ago, it wouldn't be funny today, but years ago I had this idea. There were so many conferences I wanted to go to that I decided one year I wanted to just pretend to be at every conference. I'll be like, this week I'm at, XYZ, and it's amazing. You gotta meet me in the coffee shop in the corner. Like, I could literally spin up a fictitious journey of myself where I was everywhere cool.
Yeah.
Um,
And I've definitely been like catfished before, like in an online dating context, people who presented as one way and then like looked nothing like themselves in person.
yeah, that's creepy. That's like that. But I also think so. Like, there's The Onion, which is clearly comedy and very funny, but also quite topical and relevant, and uses humor with kind of a sharp. But then there's another site, and the name is just slipping my mind. Maybe one of our listeners remembers it. It's a comedy site. It's Gold something. I don't remember now what it's called, but it's like a satire site, but it presents as real news. And you have to kind of dig in to remember that it's fake, because it presents as free. And then secondly, you'll see people repost it without the irony of knowing that it's fake, and you're like, that's fake, right? And they're like,
Yep.
I mean, satire is a great kind of protective shield. The other thing, and this may be so I think, much as I appreciate that Plato was struggling with this a long time ago, and that the idea of truth and facts has been a debate for as long as we can remember, or as we know, it does seem like something fundamental has changed. Now maybe people always feel that way about the world they're living in, but I would argue that technology has changed two things in a way that almost has no backwards pattern. The first thing is, deep fakes have gone from being kind of janky and not very serious, to almost compelling. If you're a famous person that has a lot of video about you already out on the internet, that the deepfake creator can use as a basis. But it seems to me that how long are we from a moment where I can take Alexis Scordato and have you say, I've changed my mind. I believe Donald Trump is going to be our next president. I'm supporting him, and I hope you will too. And put that out in a way that people that are your friends will be shocked, but believe that you actually said those words. Like, are we
I think
5 years away from that? You think we're there today?
If you think about this podcast, there's enough audio footage where someone could literally take my voice and make it say things that I definitely did not say. Don't do that, anyone, by the way.
I don't think I think we're very close. By the way, one of our listeners, Chad Koppelman, is a friend, has pointed out that one of the things that's changing is that people's unwillingness to comprehend scale. So global warming or income inequality come to mind as things that seem like people aren't comprehending their scale. And then he suggested, as I was trying to find this comedy site, McSweeney's, but I don't think that's the one I meant. The one that I meant was a little bit more subversive than McSweeney's. Yeah, I think I'll put it this way: certainly within 5 years, and maybe within 2. And part of it is you've got a kind of a confluence of things happening, right? There's more video of Alexa out in the world that the robots can scoop up and use. Secondly, if you think about your speaking right now, I'm looking at your face, like, the bulk of what's behind you is a wall. Your head and your hair are fairly static. The things around your shoulders are fairly static. I mean, really, the only thing that's changing when you speak is, that tiny little area around your mouth, and to some extent your facial expressions. So, that from a technologist standpoint, that's a solvable problem. And in fact, if anyone has looked at metahumans, metahumans are completely artificial humans that look, as far as I can tell, entirely believable. So all of a sudden, deep fakes come along, and anyone, I mean, if you think about where the phrase fake news has gone in 4 years, right? When Donald Trump started screaming it out 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago, it was like a cartoon character. No one was like, "What are you talking about?" And now, or even going back slightly earlier than that, to truthiness, right? Remember truthiness?
Yep.
Um, but now people seem willing to be able to say, you have your truth and I have my truth, which is, really where we've ended up. And I think deepfakes are going to drive that wedge dramatically faster. And certainly in the next 24 to 36 months.
Yeah.
And so this is just security.org, and they talk about truth decay, which is, a good spin of a phrase. But they say deepfakes 2.0 will herald the new era of truth decay. And by the way, we'll have this link in the show notes in case you want to read it on your own. I think that's probably right.
I mean, the technology is just getting so good. And if you look at the recreated footage in Star Wars, Princess Leia, if you look at Mark Hamill, if you look at the Tom Cruise thing on TikTok, if you look at just how video footage was cut of Nancy Pelosi, they're like very recent examples of this technology influencing people.
So do we think that objective truth has been disproven, or do we think that it's just less believable now? I mean, the number, as we were starting out the podcast, I said, the sky is blue or the sky isn't blue. Gravity is real. It's hard to think of a bunch of things that you and I can agree are objectively truthful with no room for debate. And there used to be more.
Yeah, but I mean, I think what we don't have are really good working definitions of what defines objective truth and how to get there. Like, objective truth has to be universally acceptable. And so if we're just going to start from the place of, what, people have too much information, they're, exposed to too much fake content that you're never going to get universal acceptance, then okay, there's no debate here. But I mean, I do think that it is admirable for people to try to pursue objective truth. I mean, scientists have to do this all the time.
Right, but there's a process, and it's slower and more ponderous than the internet seems to be willing to accept.
And I think that's that knowledge gap and has to actually be taught at scale.
So here's a puzzle that I'm thinking about a lot. If artificial intelligence needs data to make judgments, whether it's about weather or stock market trends, or which universities have better GPAs than others, whatever that is, you have to feed into the AI data. And whenever people talk to me about, well, we only want, we want trusted news sources, is one of the things I hear a lot. And my answer is always, just to save the cocktail party conversation one lap, I say, okay, is Fox News on your list or not? And they're like, well, yes, it's on our list. I'm like, fail. I'm sorry. Fox News, is promoting, COVID vaccine nonsense. So the minute you feed into the AI a source like Fox News or Breitbart as a trusted source, then you end up with this, then the output is going to be flawed or fail. And I know some of our listeners will disagree with me on that. That's okay. I mean, and then, the gray areas, people say, well, Fox News during the day is a news organization. At night, it's opinion. I'm like, all right, you're going to teach the AI to check the time of that broadcast and only take information from Fox between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m.?
I mean, some people would say yes.
Yeah. By the time you schedule that into the AI, and again, so just by way of example, some of you may know I did a TED talk on the main stage at the TED headquarters about misinformation and fake news. It was about 4 years ago now, a little bit more than that. And it was, at the time, I thought, very accurate. It was carefully researched. It was thoughtfully put together. It had, lots of different people reviewed it and had input on it. It was carefully written and presented. The only problem is the world's changed in 4 years. So does the search engine or does the AI flag that and go, this was accurate and carefully researched and well presented at this date, and the world and that information, some of it is no longer accurate? I don't actually think it's inaccurate as much as it's just dated. But if it were wildly popular, I mean, it got a bunch of views, but like if it were explosively popular, it would show up at the top of search engines, not because it's the most accurate, but because it's the most popular.
Right.
So as we are kind of running out of time, I want to recommend one last thing, which is this. There's a Pew Charitable Trust article called "What is the Future of Truth?" Well, again, we'll put the link in the show notes. And, I'll just read you a paragraph because I think it's relevant to this conversation. It says, in a country riven by intense political polarization, who can we trust to help us get dependable answers to vital questions that are central to our civic life? Ultimately, in a digital world besieged by fake news, alternative truths, doctored videos, phony websites, powerful algorithms, Russian trolls, and relentless bots, what is the future of truth?
And this was published 2 years ago in 2019.
Yep.
And we've seen events play out in the last 2 years that make, I guess, these questions that much more important.
All right. Well, I'm glad we've settled that for today.
Tech and truth, not
tech and truth. And does tech amplify misinformation and disinformation? The answer is yes. And what are we going to do about it? And is it being amplified dramatically faster than it's being addressed? I think the answer is at this point, yes, it is. And if you're feeling that out there in the world as you scan the internets today, no, you're not alone. And with that, we are out of time. Have a fantastic week. Be wary of mistruths. See you next week.
Bye.